introducing us. And Geoff, thank you so much for being with us, and looking forward to hearing you speak. And you have just so much to offer when it comes to helping people kind of get out of their own way. And fitness is a huge part of that, right? So thanks for joining us, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks so much for having me. So delighted to be doing this. In standard fashion, I've prepared a lot, and my hope is we can check it out the window. So I'd love for this to be interactive. Really feel free to throw questions in, and we'll address them sort of as organically as we can. I often, so I'm standing in my gym in Toronto. We're closed right now. One of our staff is working out, but we've been down for about a year plus. So everything's transitioned online, and I've had to be really thoughtful about how do we make this work for people. And that includes the transition to remote work. And there are some challenges, and there are also some great opportunities. So we'll get into that stuff. One of the questions I ask myself all the time is why my industry even exists. I kind of don't think it should. It shouldn't theoretically require any kind of marketing or sales or fancy setup to convince people that, hey, exercise is a good idea. Being healthy feels good. Being energetic feels good. Being at home in your own body feels good. The drugs sell themselves, theoretically. However, we wind up, most of the people I meet are sort of in this kind of some phase of boom and bust with fitness. And a lot of the conversation is around motivation. And in fact, most of my experience in speaking with people is that, the most common phrase I hear by far is, I know what to do, I just need to. And then I'll hear something about either motivation or discipline. Motivation is not reliable. And that's I think that's the main issue. We sort of plan around that. But, motivation can dip during periods of change, during periods of stress. Even positive change, by the way, can mess with your motivation. So if our whole system is propped up on having a high level of motivation, and indeed, if we think about something that's really grueling, that's very tough, we need high levels of motivation to do that. If motivation drops off, we're kind of left, holding the bag, right? So the question is, how do we manage that? So a big part of what I do is trying to take motivation out of the equation, build systems around everything. And I think of myself really as a systems guy. I started Bang in 2008, and initially thought I would be sort of a technical person, right? That's one of my strengths is coaching movement, is reverse engineering. What we learn from great athletes and making it accessible to just about anyone. However, for a lot of people, what I found was they were coming in, they were underslept, they were maybe not eating right or managing stress well. And in those instances, the impact of exercise was really attenuated, and it felt more frustrating. Like, it's one thing to put in a 6 out of 10 effort and find, mediocre results. Okay, we can live with that. But if we feel like we're really grinding, we're putting in 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 effort, and we're still not seeing an outstanding kind of return on investment, that's where people really feel frustrated. So I'm reading Bill's super consistent. So we'll speak to, there's a small group of people that have never exercised in their lives, but more likely we're going to run into one of two types of people. People who are right now consistently exercising, and the other group, which is larger, is people who have either, who have exercised consistently in the past and will exercise consistently in the future, but are not doing it now. And we want to, build systems for everyone. So knowing that lifestyle was a big factor, I really dug into nutrition, around 2009, I would say, and, learned a ton, got, did hundreds of hours of continuing education, took it back. And what I found was it helped very few people, very few. And again, almost nobody feels like they don't know what they're doing. I can count on one hand the number of times where we really blew somebody's mind with information, like, broccoli or ice cream. I don't know. It's, we have a pretty good sense of what's going on. So that's when I started around 2010 to get into behavior change and understanding habits. And what I found was a lot of stuff worked, almost nothing worked reliably. So a lot of the conventional thinking around like SMART goals, a lot of data-driven systems, all this stuff, sometimes it works, but it's not something that you can use with everyone. I became a tiny habits coach when I found the first reliable system. So we'll get into that. It's been very sort of embedded into the way I approach things. So I guess the question we want to ask is, what are we designing for? And so often, I feel like exercise starts with people asking the question, what's really hard? We have this implicit assumption, right? That if it's hard, it will be effective. So we're already designing it to be kind of unpleasant, or grueling, or requiring high levels of motivation. But there's some other questions we should be asking, like, what are our real priorities? And I would say, well, life well lived, right, is number one. We want to feel capable and free of taking part in anything that life throws our way. When I'm working with athletes, the question I'm asking is, what is the limiting factor for technical and tactical practice, for quality practice? If someone can't get into certain positions or doesn't have the mechanics to, say, change direction really quickly, we need to develop those so that they can practice at a high level. With most people, the questions we want to ask is, what are the limiting factors in terms of enhancing quality of life? Really being present, and we'll talk about that as well. And I think it's mostly some really human stuff: pain, injuries, anxiety, uncertainty. I think a lot of people, in fact, one of my big complaints about the industry is so much of it is geared to motivate people. But again, I think that this stuff is already in us. We have a drive to do this. We have an existing motivation. The trick is to harness it in a consistent way. And if we don't have a system to do that, I think just about anybody will have said, yeah, at some point I said, I want to do this big thing. I have a big aspiration, and maybe it's fitness, maybe it's business related, who knows? But now is not the right time. I need to get to X before I can make forward progress, right? So we are kind of stuck waiting. And the problem with that is, well, there are a few problems. We're at our cognitive and our emotional best when we are regularly challenged. So that's physically, that's intellectually, that's experientially. If we are waiting, we are not actively practicing our troubleshooting skills. And I think of it as, we are not actively building or practicing the building of MVPs. Because I think kind of one of my core philosophies at this point is just MVP everything in your life. If this is what we would do in business, hey, that's a great idea. How do we validate that as quickly as possible? Because we also make a lot of mistakes, right? So rather than waiting for a perfect solution, we are asking the question of, what can I test out right now and see if it works for me? Some other stuff I see along with waiting is sometimes we tell ourselves stories that are unhelpful and untrue, and ultimately we're not showing up as our best selves. I think, I know a lot of folks in this group are sort of, in transition, and when you're meeting new people, when you're showing up for a new challenge, I think it's really important that you show up with energy, right? With presence, and we need to get, just like Chrissy said at the beginning, we have to get out of our own ways to do that. And so a lot of this stuff is not so much an intervention as, what do I do right now when I'm feeling, stressed or anxious? However, we have solutions for that, and we'll get to that. It's more about what is a great cruising speed. So I would encourage you, and please, if you're comfortable, throw it into the chat. I want to think about sort of a mission statement for our own health. Like, what is our mission for health and fitness? Because if we understand our priorities with greater clarity, that is where you're going to find your most consistently available wellspring of motivation. So it doesn't rev as high. It's not a briefcase with $10 million or a gun pointed at your head, but it is really available at any time. So here's some priorities for me personally. Something that is enjoyable is better than something that is not enjoyable. And so it doesn't mean it's all easy, right? But I just go in with that mindset. So I begin by asking the question of of all my options, is there anything that jumps out at me that I would enjoy or think that I might at least enjoy experimenting with, where I can be curious about, right? Yeah, accessibility and availability. This is big, so we'll get to that. Yeah, we need something. We don't want to wait to have to get to a special place or be in a special state. We want something that we can take action with immediately. Another priority, consistency is better than inconsistency. That's how it goes. Most of the cultural language that I see around fitness prioritizes intensity, but invariably that winds up being, and I'm not talking about elite level athletes here. I'm just talking about regular people. I'm talking about me. I'm talking about you. Consistency works way better, right? So it's not the question of what is the best thing that I do once every 2 weeks. It is what can I actually roll out on a daily basis. I would rather feel calm and ready and adaptable than to be hyper vigilant, like constantly filled with adrenaline. And I've had a couple of situations I can remember where people have come into the gym and they're asking for, even though they're not really prepped for it, they're asking for high performance. They want to be push, push, push. And when we slow them down, we find that they kind of melt because they were, their whole fitness experience is propped up by adrenaline. And that can be, we have to be mindful of our stress capacity. So it's not that you can't get the job done. I think any motivated, like I assume this is a pretty motivated, driven group of people. If you are motivated, you'll get the job done. The question is, what is the cost here of doing business? And if there is a greater stress cost, that may impair our ability to come back, and because repeatability is such a high priority. So I would say that, a heuristic I'll use when working out is the only thing more important than this workout right now is the next one. So I'm asking not just what can I do to be effective, but what is going to maintain or increase my ability to come back and have a quality workout the next time. So if I wind up being injured or too sore or demotivated, that's not going to work. So, and on our not to do list, we don't, I think everyone at this point is probably familiar with growth mindset versus like a fixed mindset. I think this is good advice. I sometimes struggle with it a little bit because it's, how do we turn this into actionable advice, right? But I think we can also have a fixed mindset when it comes to what is the process like. If we always expect it to have to look a certain way or be in a certain format, that can get us stuck too. So I want to encourage you to be more dynamic about it, more kind of creative and playful. How are we doing so far? Is this a good pace? Okay. Yeah, holler anytime, and we'll address what's on your mind. So here's some good news. I can describe fitness like this. Consistency can be made easier, and that's a big priority. I would say that fitness, this is going to sound bad, but it's good. Fitness has diminishing returns. And what I mean by that is if you are already working out 7 hours a week and you add an 8th hour, you'll see maybe incremental progress, assuming you're recovering and everything's going well. But if you're working out 1 hour a week and you go to 2, that's dramatic, right? So the less you're doing, the more what you do counts. And I think it's important to remember that. Now, I would say that fitness includes some different qualities. So that's strength, that's aerobic work, that's body awareness, which includes coordination. And what another dimension to it, which I think is highly underrated, is low intensity with lots of volume. And so we use the term ADLs, like your activities of daily living, right? When do you need assisted care? When you can no longer carry out your activities of daily living without assistance, right? I think about enhanced ADLs, right? There's the blue zones is a study of the world's longest lived people. Where are the most centenarians? And all of these groups have some things in common, and none of them are gym rats. Okay? But one of the things, so they have lots of plants in their diet, and they have lots of social support, and they are they are spiritual, regardless of what their religion is. They have, you know, or their belief system. There's something that sort of unifies the community, and they have just high typical daily physical demands. There's one group that's sort of on a mountainside in Sardinia. So if you live on the side of a mountain, if you're going down to town to get groceries, if you're going up to visit your neighbor, there's just lots going on. You know, we have done such a good job of making life more convenient that we've actually, now we have to go out and intentionally seek out, you know, opportunities for physical challenge. But just as a thought experiment, if we said, hey, I know this is weird, but your bathroom, we just put the toilet at the top of 5 flights of stairs. That would be, we wouldn't have to design for that. We wouldn't have to motivate you to do that. It would just be factored into your daily life, right? So if we had that sort of ability to completely transform our physical environments, that would be one way to handle this. So I think of this as enhanced activities of daily living, and we can do that simply by walking more. Can you take a meeting on the hoof? Can you walk instead of drive? Can you park further away? You know, instead of, you know, right at the door, we can look for these opportunities. Another thing we'll do is we'll run, like I said, a lot of MVPs will constantly be looking for small experiments to run. Hey, does this work better than this? This seems kind of wild. Like, you know, in Tiny Habits, we'll do a lot of stuff. For example, we'll find a morning routine that is super consistent, like making coffee. Okay, after I turn on my coffee maker, I will do 5 squats, right? And that might feel a little funny, but you're right there, you're waiting. There's nothing to stop you. And this is just a way to incrementally add, layer in physical activity during the day. And will 5 squats in the morning while you're waiting for coffee transform your physical health? I don't think so. But when it becomes locked in and just part of your daily habits, and you do that in 50 other places, you will find your baseline cruising speed without stress, without feeling like you need to have motivation or high energy. You know, it all becomes elevated. So I think it's really important to look for these opportunities and not to discount them. And so I think of this sort of like, you know, microdosing. You know, in typical Silicon Valley fashion, we microdose fitness in this case. Now we can also use this for emotional states. So often, if I feel like I am really stressed or I'm not able to focus, I have, you know, some workouts. I have a few things that I will do personally, and we can get into all of these details. And I'd love to help you sort of customize this. So the framework I use has a few things: micro workouts, mini workouts, magic exercises, and then our larger format workouts. Okay. A micro workout generally takes 30 seconds or less. Okay. That's one of its features, that it's super fast. Typically, it's interstitial. So you can do it while you're doing other things, right? And so it never becomes a time issue. One other quality to it is there is zero emotional resistance. So if you have this idea for something you want to run, okay, but you're not sure, like you feel sometimes like, okay, if you're feeling like, let's do an example, okay? After I put my shoes on, I will do at least 2 push-ups. Okay, so we have a consistent anchor. So when we make a behavior, we have an ABC. We have anchor, behavior, and celebration. We'll talk about the celebration later. So I can do that anytime, right? If I feel like doing more, I can do more. Let's just take a pause here, because I don't want to overwhelm you. Do we have any specific questions? Because I would love to troubleshoot this. And so this could be about exercise. This could be about nutrition. This could be about lifestyle factors. Okay, so hit me if you want to take it in that direction. All
So
I
I
would
have
say,
a question, Geoff.
oh, please, yes.
So this concept of microdosing, doing things at smaller lots, like squats when you're brushing your teeth or something like that. At some point, you can take that to the nth degree and stress yourself out. So how do you find that balance, because you could be doing squats all day in theory.
Oh, so when you say stretch yourself out, how do you mean?
You stress it
stress
because
yourself
you're
out.
constantly pushing yourself to do more and more,
I would actually say that we're not. We are intentionally not looking for things that are stressful. So we are looking for things that feel like easy, incremental changes, where even on your worst day, when you're in a terrible mood and the weather sucks and your neighbor's blasting terrible music, you can still do it. So if you notice any emotional resistance, you've overshot. And we're going to make it easier. And the virtue of doing it in this way is, if you get to a point where you're feeling stressed or like it's too much or you're too sore or you're not recovering enough, we have added in such an incremental way that we have great clarity, right? As opposed to like, I was totally sedentary. I did 3 90-minute workouts during the week. And now I'm really sore and feel, and my shoulder hurts. Like, what should I do? It's really tough to pinpoint where that happened. So we're getting a couple questions here, like sleep, and we can talk about sleep quality or sleep duration. I find for most people, and I see you 5.5 hour night sleepers, it can be a tough sell. So we can look at sleep quality too, but I'm going to say here's another thing that I've experienced, right? So seldom is the solution to the problem directly interfacing with the problem. Okay. So yes, if you are having trouble sleeping, or you're waking up at night, we can definitely apply some interventions. There's some stuff like using some breathing techniques, like box breathing or 4-7-8 breathing. Ask me about those later, and let's do this as a drill. Let me teach this to you. This is a wonderful thing. And this is another tiny habit, by the way. When I feel stressed, when I notice that I'm feeling stressed or anxious, I will do at least 1 4-7-8 breath. So we're going to do a quick exhale. So imagine you're sort of blowing birthday candles out. We're going to inhale for 4 seconds. We're going to immediately exhale for 7 seconds. And we're going to hold it at the bottom of the breath for 8 seconds. Okay. So join me here. Let's do a breath. So out. In, out, okay, and then hold 8 seconds. 4-7-8. I think I counted 4-8-8, but you'll bear with me. So you can apply this anytime, right? And breathing is one of the best ways to interface with your autonomic nervous system, right? We can't always go in and say, I'm going to manually change my heart rate. I feel like my BPM resting is too high, so I'm just going to, shift that down. Can't do that, but we can control our breath. And, so this is sort of a useful tool, but mostly if we're trying to enhance sleep quality, there are a few things we can do. We can be outside and active during the day, right? Physical activity and exposure to sunlight helps reset our circadian rhythms, right? And that's actually another thing, I want to mention. Have you ever felt like it's like mid-afternoon and you're trying to do quality work, but you're feeling really sluggish? You're having trouble focusing, right? And it's like ice skating uphill. And maybe you've even, been really tough on yourself and been stressed in those moments, and still haven't really been able to produce great quality work. We as humans, we have circadian rhythms, and everybody running the show over here for the boot camp seems to be an early riser. But we tend to have 3 groups. We have our early birds, right? Our morning larks. We have our night owls, and then what Daniel Pink calls third birds, folks that are just kind of in the middle, right? And so where our middle is depends. There's a little bit of variance. But that's right. Yeah, Edison was famous for his naps. What is consistent is we tend to be our most alert, and our troubleshooting and problem solving is the best in the morning, whatever our morning is. We tend to, in the middle, have a trough where we are at our sort of our cognitive worst. We're our sleepiest, our least alert, where we are the most prone to making mistakes, right? And then we tend to rally toward the end of the day. And that's a good time for creative problem solving in particular. Well, in that middle trough, rather than kind of beat your head against the wall, what I would suggest is a change of activity. And that is where exercise can be used as a regenerative tool, and is sometimes the best thing you can do is just take a break. That's a great time to take a break. So in terms of breaking down your opportunities for exercise in the day, I would say this: the mornings are your best opportunity for technique or coordination intensive exercise when you are learning new skills. And if you don't have ongoing skill development in your exercise, even a little bit, I think you're going to find yourself struggling to make progress over time. So that is an investment we make. In the evening, right, or when we are feeling really sort of stressed or out of focus, that tends to be a great time for more intense exercise. So that can be really grinding. That can be stuff like high intensity intervals. Now, I'll warn you, for a lot of people, especially as we get older, doing that closer to bed can be disruptive for sleep if there is a stress response. So just to be mindful of that, and again, run small experiments rather than go, say, okay, I'm going to do 30 minutes of intervals at 8 p.m. I think I can do that. Try 5. See how you feel. Try that for a few nights. Run small validations and see what's going on. And in the middle of the day, my advice for you would be to do slow and low, right? So this is your best opportunity for either steady state cardio or just a good brisk walk, or anything else that you can do that doesn't, where you've got a buffer, where you're already competent in it, where you don't have to be at your sharpest to execute well or keep yourself safe, right? So this is how I would use circadian rhythms to sort of make choices around what you're doing, but don't overthink it either. Do what helps you get the job done, and then we can be a little more precious about it once you have a tremendous amount of consistency. So I'm a night owl and in an early bird world. Should I get up early or get enough sleep? I would say this. We have more freedom now, particularly with remote work. And so if you are able to work according to your circadian rhythms, and a lot of us have the opportunity to say, like, a big part of my professional life, it's really important that there are no emergencies. I don't like emergencies. And what that means is, generally, if I get asked to do something, someone needs something, I've got 24 to 48. It doesn't have to be done this second. So yeah, you can absolutely add a nap. Encouraged. Daniel Pink, the author I mentioned, I saw him speak a couple of years ago, and he said, I think where we are now with sleep, in about 10 years, that's where we're going to be with taking breaks. We do a really poor job of taking breaks. And an effective break can be a minute, can be 5 minutes, can be 15, and it can really enhance what you're doing for the rest of the day. So so another tiny habit I use is, if I feel like I'm not doing great work right now and I'm frustrated by it, I'm going to change my activity, and I'm going to go and move around. And I have some ways that I like to do that. I'll mention one other thing. I'm a terrible meditator, lifelong. I've been trying to meditate since the age of 16. I remember sitting there reading books on Zen Buddhism, but I also have ADHD, and that's a tough one. So here's how I think about it. Now, I've found meditation through movement in a lot of ways. Something that I can do that is more often coordination or skill intensive. So that is a place we are looking for the sweet spot of challenge, right? Essentially, it's deliberate practice. When I make a mistake, do I have tremendous clarity on this, on why? And is it within a narrow enough bandwidth that I can correct it, right? So when I want to do mindful movement or I want to take a crack at meditation, there are three things I do. I warm up. Okay, so I would say this: if you would warm up to do heavy squats, I would say you should also warm up to think heavy thoughts. Okay, so we prime the brain by increasing blood flow, by increasing flow of neurotransmitters to help us focus, right? And we prime ourselves for great performance. So if something's really challenging, are you setting yourself up for success? And I would do the same thing. If I had a really important meeting, or I had a task that really demanded my full talents and abilities, I would do a physical warm-up for optimal cognitive functioning. And that also relates to emotional function, because if I'm feeling stressed or I'm not able to regulate, that'll mess with my ability to focus and produce. Another thing I do is I practice resistance-free meditation all the time. And by resistance-free, I mean, I just ask the question of how little do I need to do to really not be fighting myself, and to have great quality practice. And often that's one breath at a time. But that's what meditation is. It's one breath at a time. So I never wait. So often our habits, and this is more advanced, our tiny habits tend to be based on context, right? Like, or pardon me, on actions. What am I already doing? What's a thing in my life that I already do? I just kind of, I chain it to that. We use that as an anchor. But you can also use that with thoughts, like an intrusive thought. When you hear your inner critic, that can be a prompt. In fact, that is your brain trying it. I think a lot of our tensions and anxieties are our brain providing us with a prompt, which is not an issue. The issue is we don't know how to respond to it in the moment. So action is really, to me, the opposite of anxiety. So the question is, how do we, nice, Sherry. Yeah. Like whatever, we can start to drop little things. By the way, I'll mention one other thing with sleep. Almost never have I found a magic bullet for people. Usually the habits we built around sleep, anything from, gradually turning the lights down, the standard advice on blackout blinds and electronics and all that stuff. But very rarely does one thing do the trick. Usually we need to stack up maybe 10 or 15 habits, little changes to your environment, your routines, to make it click. So just because a small incremental change doesn't immediately get you great success, just plant that seed and nurture its tiny little roots. And then when you're ready, move on to the next thing. And if you grow enough of these little habits around your routines, you will find eventually, my experience with tiny habits in particular is it's all incremental until it becomes exponential. There will be a phase shift. You've made it so, you've done everything you can to massage the process and make the environment ideal for this, so that when you finally add that one last thing on, all of a sudden you're, a phase shift in motor learning, that's what we'd say. A horse trots and it adds a little more speed, it's still trotting, adds a little more speed, it's still trotting. And we add speed incrementally, but at some point it shifts into a canter. It's a beautiful thing. 3 steps for meditation. So all I'm saying is, if meditation is not easy or intuitive to you, that's okay. Part of that process is just being aware of that. But first thing is, you can set yourself up for success by spending 5 to 15 minutes on a mini workout. Just get the blood flowing. We don't want to ramp up the stress response. So it's not going to be super intense, but it's going to kind of bring your full physical self to bear. And that,
Jeff,
yes, please.
What would you consider a mini workout? Like doing what? What specifically?
I just did a mini workout. So it can be as little as a mini workout. That's a micro workout. A mini workout typically takes between 2 and 15 minutes. One of my favorite places for a mini workout is as a partition in your day, because one of the issues when we're working from home is, well, you're really sleeping where you work, right? Your whole day can kind of bleed together. So when you create these partitions in your day, it changes your sensory experience. it changes your experience of the day and gives you opportunities to really feel like we have successfully transitioned from one activity to another. So, you know, after I get off of a Zoom meeting, I might do 5 minutes of movement, and that can be really helpful. I also mentioned magic exercises, and I'll say this. So I told you how a micro workout, we never have any resistance to it. A magic exercise, you might have some resistance to it. It is harder. What we are asking is this question. What is the highest ROI? What is a ridiculously high ROI for 30 seconds of exercise? How can we be super strategic about that? And often it comes down to either a limiting factor, like, oh, if I have trouble creating enough stability and structure in my core to exercise without low back tenderness, or to have an efficient transfer of power, you know, say when I'm playing tennis or whatever else, well, that is super high ROI, because it's almost like a meta exercise habit. It's going to feed into everything else you do. If you're rehabbing an injury, it's the same thing. Sherry says, I have kettlebells under my desk for mini workouts. Yes, I love that. I need to use them more during the week. Okay, so that is where we would try to find an anchor. After I get up and go to the bathroom, right? Or like after I come back from the bathroom, for example, I will. And it can be, I will do at least 2 goblet squats, right? As an example, I will do at least 2 rows. I like when I build micro workouts, I often like to say, okay, well, I'll do 2 reps on one side. And people sometimes say, well, if you're just doing it on one side, what about the other side? If that drives you nuts, that asymmetry, you're going to wind up doing the other side anyway. So we don't have to design for it. Your motivation, your inherent motivation will account for it. So sometimes one of the little, you know, tricks I've learned in 15 plus years of designing exercise programs for people is, if I put in a little irritant, something that just isn't quite right, if I really know the person, they will handle. If they are a completionist and we gave them something that was just like a little bit beyond, they'll handle it. Yeah, you could. I should be working out right now. Yes, I mean, you certainly could. But here's what I want to encourage you to do. Okay, I'm gonna read this. I should be doing this right now while watching the session, but I'm not. I'm multitasking. You know, I encourage you, when you notice, when you have that thought, that is a prompt. So the only real question is, what do we need to do? How tiny do we need to make it so you can take action immediately? And that could be as simple as, okay, you're multitasking, reach, stretch, you know, check in with your body, spread your toes, lift your big toe up, right? Can you lift your big toe up without bringing the other toes along for the ride? Can you push your big toe down and then lift the other toes without the big toe rising? Can you shift the weight all the way laterally to one side? Can you shift the weight laterally to the other? What can you prep as if you're about to stand up, right? These are all things that we can do in the moment. And if you find versions of movement and exercise that can be done interstitially like this, that only take a second, not only does it layer on that physical dimension to your life and change and sort of deepen our experiences, it also means that we never have to say no to these prompts. And that is a practice, right? To every time a thought occurs to us, what if we never had that tension of saying, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. What if we were able to respond to that? And we got really good. And it began, you know, I think for me, this has really changed the way I think about myself, because I know that it's really added a lot of a confidence and a sense of confidence, because every time I'm prompted, and I mentioned that I have ADHD, what that means to me is a million impulses and prompts during the day. You should do this, you should try that, don't forget about this. You know, traditionally I've had, you know, 300 tabs open. If it's not, you know, in front of me to remind me, I'll forget about it. And by doing this, it has freed up a lot of mental bandwidth. It is like closing a lot of those tabs cognitively, because I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to struggle to remember it. I just respond to it and move on. And the things that feel good, that's the other thing. Pay attention to the signals for what feels good. And I think that's a practice that most of us need to get better at, because if we're looking for, I want you to imagine a quadrant, right? And let's talk about nutrition. I'll put it in these terms. there are foods that are good for you, that are 100% congruent with your goals, okay, with your greater aspirations for health and fitness, right? I'm gonna come back to celebration. So here are the things that are good for you, right? And then we have another quadrant, and these are foods that are not supportive of our fitness goals, but man, we enjoy them. They taste good, okay? And I encourage you to enjoy food. Food is your friend. Food is love. And so I really don't counsel any kind of restrictive mindset, but what we are looking for, wherever possible, is where do these two things overlap? So, and it doesn't have to be perfect. They don't have to be 10 out of 10, but what are the foods that serve your goals and you enjoy eating, right? We would look for those. And in fact, it would behoove us to discover new ones or discover new recipes that make more space for this, right? It is a much more enjoyable way to live. And I would do the same thing with exercise. What are the things that just have enjoyment factory installed, right? That are congruent with my goals. So I think it's really important to look for that overlap. So the question was, so I mentioned the ABCs: anchor, behavior, celebration. So what is a celebration? This is typically, tiny habits by definition are easy, okay? Are easy to do, but the thing that we have the most friction with people is celebration. Why do we celebrate? Because emotions lock in memories. I guarantee your strongest memories have an emotional component to them. And so when we are trying to learn, right? So we've solved for motivation. Your motivation doesn't have to be high. We just need to know if it's something you really want to do. There's enough motivation to do it. The next question is it super accessible? Is it easy for you to do, right? Have we factored in your environment and your current skills? So we've solved for these two things. The only remaining question is, will I remember to do it? And when we celebrate, again, it adds depth of emotional experience. It makes us more successful in remembering stuff. How do we celebrate? I would encourage you to ask what your natural, authentic celebrations are. I'm a terrible natural celebrator. I don't pump my fist or shout or sing or dance. So I really had to work on this. But as a thought experiment, think of someone who you really admire and respect. I use Oprah a lot in this one, but like someone who it would mean the world to you to meet them, okay? And you see this person's coming to town and they're gonna have a special lunch, and this is really unusual, but you can email in and enter, and they're gonna do sort of a raffle draw. And maybe you don't normally respond to this stuff, but you enter your name, months go by, you've forgotten about it, you get an email one day, it's from Oprah, it's from whoever, and the subject says, looking forward to meeting you. What do you do in that moment? What do you do in that moment? Do you pump your fist? Do you dance? That's a big authentic celebration, right? And so if you have just done a thing, right? You are trying to wire in a new habit that really serves you. We can with intention and conscious control, increase our enjoyment of that thing. And that's what makes it sticky.
Geoff, that's actually a really good point. And you've mentioned this a couple of times. It's like, don't force the workout kind of. And so but look at what you might want to do. So it's like reinforcing it with that positive feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Why wouldn't we start there? Now, that doesn't preclude you from doing more. That doesn't eliminate your option of exercising motivation or discipline. But the difference is we make starting easy. And if you feel like doing more, once you're in the groove, that is your best application of discipline, is not constant decision making. If I feel like I eat too many cookies and there's a bag of cookies sitting on the counter, and every time I pass it, I'm waging war with myself, that is an enormously inefficient use of willpower and discipline, right? We design for environment. So if we just get rid of the cookies, all that's gone. And then rather than doing that, maybe when I'm shopping, or I'm designing a list, or or I might decide to level up a skill. If I have a burst of motivation, increasing my cooking skills, investing in maybe a piece of equipment that makes the process, like a great chef's knife, that makes the process more enjoyable, that's the best use of my discipline or my burst of motivation. It is not constantly challenging myself, because guess what? For me personally, if that bag of cookies is there, I'm eating it. And I don't even fight with myself about it. I just take it as, I assume that it's going to get eaten. Delicious prepared food, if you are a human being, you'll eventually eat that food. It is not a great battle to wage. And I think the people who do that all the time are invariably wind up being tough on themselves. But it's not your fault. Cookies are delicious. You just didn't set yourself up for success.
That's actually, those are really good points. Now we have 7 minutes left. Let's open it up to other people. Just unmute yourself and ask a question.
Hi, Geoff. This is Sergio. How are you?
Hey, Sergio, I'm great. Nice to meet you.
A quick question. What would you recommend? I know that I love hiking and I'd rather walk and jog, but I have an injury. I have meniscus, torn meniscus. And the stationary bike doesn't seem to do the job. So I try to walk, but that aggravates the injury. What would you recommend?
So yeah, it's a great question. We want to look for, I'm not here to diagnose, but just out of curiosity, does it catch at all, or is it just painful?
It does. If I overdo it, I used to hike a lot, and one time I found myself not being able to get out of the store. Yeah. Okay.
So that is something that is often scoped out just to clear that catching. But as ever, I would ask the question of what can we do that's pain-free? And here's a counterintuitive thing about exercise that not everybody, we assume that if we want to perform better, we need to make the exercise easier. However, sometimes by increasing demands, and be smart when you do this, but sometimes by increasing demands, we are asked to solve problems at a higher level. We bring it all together. Because if I'm doing a squat with 3 pounds, I can have really dodgy form. Okay, I have the liberty to do that. But if you give me a squat with 300 pounds, I've got to be damn near perfect. And so I'm not saying go put 300 pounds on your back, but you might find that certain exercises, if you load them more, the technique becomes more intuitive. What brings this to mind is walking or running uphill, even though it's harder and more physically demanding, often forces better running mechanics. So you may find, be cautious, be gentle with yourself, but you may find that works. Swimming is an obvious issue or obvious example, but we find, here's another thing. Even people with really messed up knees can usually be great deadlifters and deadlift without pain. So you still have an opportunity to develop strength. The difference is there's no translation of weight forward in your feet. By keeping it in the same spot and letting your hips move back, it winds up being very knee friendly.
What about aerobic versus resistance?
Yes.
Let's say,
yeah.
So as far as a mood booster, what would help your mood, and to shift emotional states?
Do you prefer, vanilla or pistachio? I ask because I'm a pistachio guy, but I mean, they're both great. It's personal preference. Both can, there's more research on aerobic training. So it is better validated for mood. However, we have absolutely found lots of success with strength training. So for a mood booster, I wouldn't do the highest intensity work, but I would do stuff that challenges you and challenges your skills and asks you to explore. So often it's just a question of trying different things out, but they're both super useful and they're both really important to increasing your health span.
Okay.
So yeah.
And so Alexandra asks, what's a good way to get in touch with you? And we're going to send out your email address to everyone. And then Amin asked, can you tell us about your Tiny Habit coaching program?
Yeah, here, I'm just gonna put a link in. So I've got I started prepping some stuff for y'all, okay? So that's a survey link. You fill that in and let me know. So if you want to, did I leave room to talk to me about coaching?
So
Yeah.
we have,
Yeah.
3 minutes, so we need to wrap up, but
So you can fill out, if you want me to send you some stuff or you want to know about coaching, I can talk you through that. Okay.
okay,
Next question.
awesome.
Oh,
Any
tiny
other
habits.
questions? We have just,
Yeah.
tiny habits. Talk about the
It's
tiny
not,
habits.
it's not my tiny habits program. It's from BJ Fogg, who runs the behavior design lab at Stanford, who is really one of the good guys. And I learned from him and his sister, Linda Fogg. So you can do a free 5-day program. And that's on tinyhabits.com. There's a coaching certification, which I did. Yes, Anna. That's so good. So that's what we call a pearl habit. It is where an irritant turns into something beautiful, right? So yeah, but I mean, I just think, again, in a decade plus, tiny habits, and it's part of the larger framework of behavior design, is the only thing that I have found to work reliably. So I'm a big advocate for it. Great. Got time for two more?
One more
One more.
question.